Take a look at oil prices. Actually, this is interesting. They barely registered a blip after OPEC Plus announced a production hike of 137,000 barrels per day that traders say looks pretty modest. While the boost fell short of what many analysts were expecting, OPEC Plus says it retains flexibility to alter the adjustment in the coming months. Brent crude in the aftermarket is actually, it was up just under 1%, but it's $3 off last week's high of $68 and change. And it's kind of the same with West Texas Intermediate. It's a couple of bucks lower than it was even last week. But these prices could take a sharp turn. President Trump telling reporters he is prepared to slap Russia with a new wave of sanctions after just a horrific scene played out in Kyiv on Sunday. Russia pummeled Ukraine with the largest drone offensive so far in this 3.5-year war, killing at least 5 people, including a young woman and an infant. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched 805 Iranian-designed exploding drones across the country in Ukraine, in addition to the loss of life. For the first time since the full-scale invasion in 2022, the attack severely damaged the Cabinet of Ministers building where the Prime Minister's office is housed. As we await a possible meeting in Washington between the European Union's senior sanctions envoy and U.S. officials, we're joined now by U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Ambassador, thank you for being here at this critical time. You know, this last attack just last night makes it fairly clear that not only is the Kremlin ignoring President Trump's efforts to stop the violence, but Putin appears to be outright flouting the president now. What is the next move on this increasingly bloody chessboard?
Well, thanks for having me on. I think the next move is obviously to continue to try to find a way to get these two sides to agree to a peace deal. And I know it seems far away, especially when you have the attacks like you did. And I just spoke this morning with our ambassador to Ukraine. And, it's obviously every night is scary. It's, it was described to me that the war happens at night if you're in Kyiv, and then during the day, things are normal. Obviously, it would be very strange for any human being to experience that, but especially every single night. And, Vladimir Putin obviously has calculated that he's going to try to cause as much terror and claim as much territory as he possibly can in anticipation that this war is going to end. And, I continue to applaud President Trump. He brought Putin to the table. He continues, as you mentioned, to look for additional ways to apply leverage to make sure Putin not only stays at the table, but is incented ultimately to end this war, because it is horrific. It's catastrophic. 7,000 or more soldiers, not including these civilians you mentioned, are dying every single week. If you put 7,000 human beings in a football stadium, you would say that is a lot of people. And that's what's happening every single week on the battlefield in Ukraine. It's catastrophic.
Well, so the president obviously made a good faith effort bringing Putin to America. They met in Alaska. President Trump was very, very warm in greeting him. Some people did not like to see that. And then sure enough, Putin leaves. You talk about bringing him to the table. As he walked away from the table, he grabbed the tablecloth and yanked all the dishes onto the ground because nothing really has changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. So President Trump has talked about second stage of sanctions. What would those look like?
Well, it would continue to take away the money that is funding this war effort. Now, the Russian economy is struggling, and obviously the government's funds that are coming in every month are diminishing, and so there are some near-term cracks that are starting to appear in the Russian economy, and so the money that's paying for this war is coming from the sale of Russian oil to countries including India, China, and Brazil, and I think it's applying those additional sanctions and those additional tariffs to continue to increase the cost of doing business for Vladimir Putin, reduce his revenue, and I think it has to, important point, it has to be done in coordination with the European Union. It has to be the whole free world that is saying this is not acceptable this death and destruction we're seeing needs to end, and really continuing to increase the pressure on Vladimir Putin to end this war, because both sides are going to have to agree. But Ukraine has proven and demonstrated that they're willing to make a deal. Yeah. They're willing to freeze the front line if they get security guarantees. I think there's a framework for a deal, and now we just need to make sure it happens.
Well, speaking of security guarantees, on September 5th, Vladimir Putin came out and said that one of the root causes of the conflict, no, they invaded Ukraine, but one of the root causes was drawing Ukraine into NATO, and he threatened that any foreign troops, European, American, on Ukraine soil would be considered basically a legitimate target. So what is the problem with Ukraine joining NATO? Finland shares something like an 830-mile border with Russia. They are now a member of NATO. And therefore, it really begs the question, if this invasion underscores why Ukraine needs to be a member of NATO, does it not?
Well, first of all 32 countries would have to agree to any accession of Ukraine or any other country to NATO, and it requires a certain framework and certain steps along the way. And quite frankly, it was agreed to several years ago that Ukraine was on a path ultimately to join NATO, but there have to be certain hurdles and benchmarks along that path, and so we're just not there yet. I think the most important thing in this context of this war are the security guarantees, and making sure that Ukraine, who has the largest army in Europe right now and is battle tested and battle experienced, can defend itself. But at the same time, I think there is a necessity to have European troops there, as whether they're peacekeepers, whether they're trainers, whatever role. I think it's going to be important to provide those security guarantees, and it's got to, because those security guarantees are what is going to allow Volodymyr Zelensky to make a deal. If he feels like the war can't be continued once it ends or won't restart, then he's much more likely to make the deal he needs to make in order to have Russia end this conflict as well. But you're right, Russia invaded Ukraine. I've never really paid much attention to Vladimir Putin and his reasons for the war. I think a lot of them are based in a very confused version of history and how the countries came to being. But nonetheless, I think we're going to have both sides agree, and whatever that agreement, whether it's protecting Russian churches in Ukraine, Russian-speaking citizens of Ukraine. I mean, I think there is a framework right now. There have been enough discussions, and the great news is that President Trump continues to bring both sides to talk and to try to work this out and to get to a peace deal, because we have to end the killing.
Agreed. Ambassador Whitaker, thank you very much for joining us during a very busy time. You're in Brussels. We appreciate it. Keep us posted. Thank you.
All right. My pleasure. Good to see you.